I was a bright, bubbly, high-achieving student. I was fit, healthy and happy. After the sexual assaults, it was like a 180-degree flip on that.
Karen was just 14 when she says she was raped repeatedly by a notorious gang of teenagers and young men during a family holiday to the Gold Coast.
Older teenage boys who started hanging out in the pool area, latching on, and I now recognise that what happened to me were classic grooming behaviours that any pedophile would use with a child.
Karen was in her 20s when she finally built up the courage to walk into a New South Wales police station and tell officers everything.
I gave the exact location, the exact year, the exact month. I gave the name of the gang. I gave physical descriptions. I gave the names of a co-victim and a witness. I also handed over my childhood diary, and that diary has never, ever been found again after I handed it over.
Queensland detectives started an investigation, but it stalled because of a lack of cooperation by New South Wales Police. It appeared to have been forgotten until 2018 when Queensland Police told her they believed her formal statement had been shredded.
Hearing those words, that is what had happened, absolutely destroyed me.
But when a copy of her file turned up 3 years later, police confirmed it hadn't been destroyed after all.
I expected them to do their job and to do what their training had taught them, which was to, retain evidence, interview perpetrators, interview witnesses, collect evidence and investigate.
There was failures on all counts and it's appalling, but it's not surprising.
Former head of Victoria Police's Sexual Crimes Squad, Glenn Davies, says serious cultural change is needed within the force.
It's not an isolated case. It has been going on for generations, and there's been a failure of leadership of epic proportions.
Glenn says it's not only the victims of sexual assault that should be outraged.
The community should be outraged as well, that there are perpetrators and offenders out there left unchecked and continuing to offend and wreak havoc on people's lives.
The police are the gatekeepers to our justice system. The police have discretion what they will and won't investigate, and that discretion is quite unchecked. It's not legally enforceable.
On International Women's Day 2023, Karen is pushing for laws that will hold police to account. Karen is now a lawyer who fights for the rights of others, and she joins us now. Karen, what specifically are you pushing for?
Well, I'm pushing for legislative reform. So what I'm asking for is the politicians and the Attorney Generals in particular in our country, in every state and territory, to create a legally binding minimum standard of investigation so that when someone like myself goes in and reports a serious crime to police, that we as a society know exactly how the police are going to investigate that, and there's a minimum standard that they will need to meet to be able to satisfy that an investigation has been conducted properly. And we need that to be a legally enforceable duty, because at the moment all the police training mechanisms and culture change is just simply not enough. Victims and their families are being failed every single day by police forces around this country.
Police have admitted there's a cultural problem, so what do you think needs to change culturally?
What we need is a rule book, and for that rule book to be legally enforceable, not discretionary, but legally enforceable, so that there's accountability for our police forces, and also so that they know exactly what it is that our community expects from them.
Karen, it was International Women's Day 19 years ago that you first reported this. How did the date motivate you?
I'm quite sure that I was actually at the International Women's Day annual protest march, and I think I must have finally thought, well, this is the last straw. You know what? I've got a bit of courage from all these other fabulous women that I'm around, and I'm going to take that step of going to the police and reporting this. And I took with me my lovely, beautiful friend who was my flatmate at the time, and we went up the road to Newtown Police Station, and she accompanied me and supported me in reporting these crimes.
Karen, you are just extraordinary, and we know that only a small number of women who've been sexually assaulted report to the police.
That's right.
Given your experience, what would you like to say to victims and other survivors out there?
Oh, gee, I would say think about it before you report to police. Make sure that you're armed with all of the information that you can when you go in there. You know, keep note of everything, particularly your dealings with police when you report. Consult a lawyer before you report, because it is so important that you're poised and considered when you make these reports, and then having someone in your corner to really make sure and advocate for you to help police understand what it is that you're wanting to have happen, and that what your expectations are. I'd also say before you do anything is get yourself a counsellor and great family and community support around you, because the trauma of the sexual assaults themselves is one thing, but the trauma of dealing with police and the trauma of dealing with our justice system is something entirely different. In my case, that trauma of dealing with police is much worse, if you can believe it, than the trauma of the gang rapes that I endured. And that's a really full-on thing to say.
And if you could say anything to your 14-year-old self, that young girl, so full of hope and dreams for the future, what would you say to her?
Gosh, I would say keep studying at school, go be a lawyer, fight for the rights of others. I would also say don't blame yourself, because I know that I blamed myself for many, many years for what happened to me. I'd say your truth is your truth. You are believed. And no one can take that from you, no matter how many times people try and, you know, throw the ball to someone else and shift the blame for not doing anything. That you are believed, and that, you know, just as my dad says, hello, Dad, stick to the facts. Just keep sticking to the facts, and at some point, justice will prevail. And I hope that the Attorney Generals tonight are watching, and that they will take note and change the laws so that victims and survivors have rights. We need rights. It's not just the accused that should have rights, but victims need rights as well.
Karen, thank you so much for taking your time to share your story tonight. We really appreciate it.
Before we leave that story, a statement from both New South Wales and Queensland Police can be found on our website in relation to that. There you will also find a link for Karen's campaign and for National 24-hour counselling helpline and support. There is, of course, 1800 RESPECT. So that number again, 1800 737 732.